Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Radcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend Shonen Ouji. If you'd like to introduce yourself. I mean, I did just introduce you.
It's all good. I'll take it from here. What's going on, everyone? Shonen Ouji here, or you can just call me Ouji. I make a bunch of content. I make Chainsaw Man content, Eden Zero content, Dr. Stone content. Recently, with the new season, I've been making Vinland Saga content, all kinds of stuff.
Exciting indeed. And so this conversation has been long overdue because I've actually known OG for quite a while, but we never actually spoken properly about anime and manga, and we're both content creators, and we are into a lot of the same series. So I know you are a big fan of One Piece as well. I've seen a few Bleach videos on your channel. Your channel is kind of like what I'm working towards trying to turn my channel into, because I used to be, I don't want to say constrained, but I was mainly in the One Piece niche, and now I'm trying to branch out into all sorts of anime and manga, and hopefully eventually into just media in general with TV shows and movies as well. But that's something in the future, not anytime soon. But yeah, I do like your channel just based off the things I've been looking at, because you kind of dabble in everything, and that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you very much. I'll let you ask about it, but basically that was a result of a lot of experimentation, because for those of you familiar with the YouTube game, especially in the anime community, there's a big debate of like, do you focus on one thing? Do you do a bunch of stuff?
Yeah.
So it was a product of a lot of experimentation. So it means a lot that you enjoy what I have to offer.
Yeah, it's been a very similar journey for myself, because there was a time where, I mean, I tried to branch out from One Piece about like a year and a half ago now, I'd say. And it went kind of terribly in the sense that I could drop a One Piece video I barely put any effort into, and it would completely outperform a non-One Piece video that I'd spent so much time on. And that was very demoralizing, sort of. And it kind of just made me take a huge break from YouTube, because I wasn't as passionate about making One Piece content anymore. But I think the break was kind of a good thing in my case. I mean, for most people, taking a long break is not good for your channel. But for me, it was kind of helpful, because it kind of like reset what the algorithm expects of me, and I was able to return with content on different series, and everything, even One Piece content, was performing around the same level, nowhere near as good as it used to, and I had to watch it slowly climb, and then eventually I had a few videos that have now performed better than any of my One Piece videos ever have. So we're just gonna keep riding this wave and see how it all goes.
Yeah, for sure. It's challenging, and it's why I love where the One Piece community is at as far as YouTube.
Yeah.
But it also is concerning, like when I see a new creator and they start like popping off with One Piece content, I want to just like DM them on Twitter and be like, dude, stop now. Just do anything else.
Bro, the One Piece community is mad competitive on YouTube. It's the best I've personally come across in terms of like a specific series, because they're so welcoming and so helpful to each other. You've got the Reverie. It's a nice community compared to, I don't think there is any other real anime like a specific anime or manga community that is as close knit as the One Piece community. But it's competitive. You're getting new heads popping up every month or so and doing really great stuff, which is dope, don't get me wrong, but I kind of just wanted to get away from that personally, because I don't like to feel like I'm regurgitating something that 15-20 other people have already said, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the big thing with One Piece, is like there's so much content, and the problem is there's only so much at this point in the market of One Piece content that does well. So even if you do different topics, everyone is basically doing the same video on their channel over and over again. And then like among channels, everyone is basically making the same videos. So yeah, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about yourself in regards to anime and manga.9How long have you been into anime and manga? Like, what did you start off with? Were you like most who started off with anime? I assume you were, and then moved on to manga? Or were you somehow a rare breed who started off with manga somehow? Technically, so if we're being technical, my first experience with anything was the Pokemon animated show when I was a kid. Okay. But if you don't count that, I guess technically it would be I read a few manga about the same age, I read a manga adaptation of Kingdom Hearts, and then I read a manga adaptation of a kids' horror series about vampires. I can't remember the name of the series. It's called Cirque du Freak. That's what it's called.
Oh.
There is a manga adaptation for it.
Yeah, I know about Cirque du Freak. Okay.
But go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so that's interesting. You are a rare breed then, because I wouldn't count the Pokemon personally. I mean, that's something we all grew up with.
Yeah, right.
That kind of falls under the bracket of cartoon, even though it is anime. It does kind of fall under that bracket in like the general sphere.
Yeah, but it's weird for me though. So like, I would read those manga, but I didn't really like register them as manga. Like,
Yeah,
kind of just like these
like-
weird books. Like, why are they, the other way?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
My first real experience was playing like some of the early Dragon Ball games.
Okay.
And then I familiarized myself with those. And then when I really got into them, I was like, let me check out the Dragon Ball show. So then I watched Dragon Ball for years. Again, still didn't really register it as anime. It wasn't until I was like in high school that I was like, oh, this is anime. Like, let me check out other anime. And then I got into One Piece and stuff. And the funny thing is, I didn't really consider myself an anime fan until I'd say like maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
Because it was 5 years ago where I'm like, wait a minute, I watch Dragon Ball, I watch One Piece, I watch Fairy Tail, I watch Sword Art Online. I was like, I guess I like anime.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a similar thing with me as well, because I didn't really register myself as an anime fan until about 2019 when I joined Twitter, because I had watched a bunch of anime up until that point, but for me, anime was always just like, another branch of media, like in the same way I would watch TV shows and movies. And I mean, it still is, but being on Twitter and making content on YouTube, you kind of identify with it a bit more. Because it's more so about anime and manga, and my favorite works are anime and manga. Well, for me it's mainly just manga, to be honest. But yeah, how do you pronounce it, manga or manga? I just had a comment about this, and I switch between the two all the damn time. Like, it's so inconsistent with that.
So I say manga. I believe that's how you're supposed to say it. But if you say manga, I'm gonna know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And also, if anyone makes an issue out of that, it's like, dude, grow up.
Yeah.
Go for a soda. Relax.
I love that. Go for a soda. Yeah. Nah. I've always found it interesting because I don't know if it's a product of just like accents. Because I've seen Japanese people like refer to it in both both ways. I've heard manga and manga from. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I'm gonna look deep into that. I would think
that's a British thing. I mean, manga.
Drama. Yeah. Perhaps water. Yeah.
A bit, maybe, perhaps.
Perhaps just a wee bit. Yeah. So, when did you first start looking at manga or anime a bit more seriously? Because everyone has that phase, especially like YouTube creators. Everyone has that phase where it's just, this is something I do for fun and entertainment, and then you start to like love it a bit more. I think you kind of just answered this technically with a few years ago when you realized you're an anime fan. But when did you start feeling like, oh, I'd enjoy making videos and like getting onto YouTube? When did you start YouTube actually? I don't know this.
So basically what happened was, it was the summer before I started law school. I had no job, no girlfriend, wasn't doing anything. I'm between college and law school, got nothing going on. So I'm like, I should probably do something with my life right now. So I'm like, okay, starting a YouTube channel looks cool. Let me try that. Right? So I'm like, all right, what am I going to talk about? And this was my approach then, and this is my approach now, and this is what I recommend to anybody for anything, whether it's a YouTube channel, writing, or even just what you want to do with your life or your interests. The way I approached it, and I still approach it, is let me pick something that I love so much that someone has to tell me to shut up.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that was anime. Like, I was at a bonfire, and I kept talking about like how excited I was for the adaptation of Wano, and someone literally had to be like, okay, dude, I get it, it's cool. And so I was like, oh, this is what I should talk about. So that was over 3 years ago, because right now I'm at like 3.5 years into YouTube.
Okay.
So I basically started out like everybody does, just making like very, very generic review videos, and also like zero video production experience. My only experience was that I could kind of make thumbnails. Other than that, I knew how to press record on a camera, and that is pretty much it.
That's cool, because I kind of had a very similar experience, honestly, at around the same time as well. So I dropped my first video in like the last week of December 2019, and I was in a similar phase. I was if I remember clearly, I was 18 at the time. Yeah, was I 19? I was 18. See, I don't even know my own age. I think I was 18 at the time. I was in a similar phase, didn't really have anything going on at the time, and it was like, what should I do? And I just decided on making content, because for me it was a bit different, because I immediately knew what I would be doing, because I was already part of the One Piece community. So you see, what happened was I started a few months before that. I joined BDA Law's Discord, which is known as the most toxic place on the interwebs, and I would get in the voice chat there, argue with a bunch of strangers about One Piece, power scaling, that sort of thing. From there, I meet my good friend, who's still my good friend to this day, JD Legend, and Jay introduced me to a bunch of guys. His YouTube is just really starting out at that point. I get on streams with him and whatnot. And so, because I'm getting on streams with him and people like what I have to say, without even creating content, I've got like a few people who, I wouldn't call them fans, but a few people who kind of supported me in the chat. And I noticed that, and I thought, you know what, I would really enjoy making content. So why not? And I went for it, made my first video, but luckily I did have some production experience. I wouldn't say production experience, but some experience with video editing, because as a kid, I was one of those kids who would play Call of Duty and, you know, dream of joining FaZe or one of those clans one day. So I'd edit a bunch of like Call of Duty montages. They were terrible because I was a kid, but I knew my way around the ropes with video editing and even a bit of Photoshop. So it was cool. It was cool. I had a bit of a head start in that regard. Like, going back to my first video, the editing is like really, really average. I'd say it's like it's pretty much bad in comparison.
Oh, yeah, same.
Yeah, it's pretty much bad, but I'm still like, you know, that's pretty good. I've seen some people's first videos that are worse, so I was like, you know what, I had a bit of a head start in that sense. But yeah, it's been a cool experience, and I literally just hit 10,000 subscribers today. Well,
yeah, congrats again, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. So hopefully onwards and upwards, but this is going to be uploaded a few days from now, so I will hopefully have reached 100k by then. And
obviously. You're just so elite that it'll just carry itself.
It just happens, man. We just times it by 10 just like that. But yeah, so let's dive into what we're really here for. We've spent enough time talking about our past and all that boring shit. I guess I'm handing it over to you now, because it's time for me to show you if you're really, you know, an agenda pusher. We have to see your skills. So we want to talk about Eden Zero and Dr. Stone. We'll start off with Eden Zero, and I want you to let me know about this series, because as of right now, I know little to nothing about Eden Zero. I just know there's a character who looks like the spitting image of Happy from Fairy Tail, and the main character dynamic looks a lot like Natsu and Lucy in terms of character design. But I do think that's cool, because Mashima does this thing of like, he has this like this staple framework for his character designs in all three of his series, from Rave Masters, Fairy Tail, and Eden Zero. And I've seen that be used for slander, but I actually think that's kind of dope. It's like he just picked something and he stuck with it, and it's a really cool kind of dynamic with the MCs. Did Rave Master have a male and female a lead?
Technically yes. It had Haru and it had Ellie.
Okay. So yeah, I was right. Okay, I didn't want to seem fraudulent there.
No, and I'm glad you brought up Rave Master, because when the series was starting out and people were like bringing up the criticism of, oh, he just recycles characters, and he would cite Fairy Tail, and Fairy Tail fans would be like, well, clearly you've never read Rave Master, because he did the same thing when he went from Rave Master to Fairy Tail.
Yeah. I don't see why I don't see why that's a problem either. But yeah, To me it just is like, it's like this distinct style. It would, of course, I understand people like to see like some kind of diversity, and sure, that can be good, but the opposite isn't always bad, you know what I mean? You know, sticking to what you know.
Oda does another series after One Piece and he does it, oh, it's gonna be the shit. Everyone's gonna be like, oh, he brought Nami back, he brought Zoro back. But if Mashima does it, he's like, oh, he's washed up.
No, bro, Oda does it in his own. Oda does it in one series. Like, come on now.
It's so funny because I remember I said a while ago, so there was like some tweet about like, it was something different. It wasn't Mashima, but it was actually about One Piece, actually. Like, oh, Oda just draws the same faces. And I was just like, have you ever watched JoJo's Part 5? Can you not tell me they have the exact same face?
Oh, brother.
The exact same face.
Oh,
Everyone,
brother.
like, looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, am I seriously the only one who sees this? Like, they all have different personalities, all different characterizations, all completely different outfits. But if you look at their face, they're all the exact same face.
That's very true. I actually agree with you on this one. I'm anime only for JoJo, but I agree with you on this one. That's one thing about Araki's character designs that always confused me, because if you show me like face shots of those characters, I would not know how to name them too well. I mean, it's been a few years since I've watched the anime, but I won't be able to tell you who is. I mean, I'll be able to tell you who's Bruno and who's Giorno, like the most obvious ones, but the side characters, I would struggle there. I would really struggle there. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I feel like this is the thing, right? I feel like this is one annoying thing we have in the anime community. Absence of a good quality is not a bad quality. If you're lacking, because having distinct character designs and facial designs in between each character, that's a very great quality for an artist to have. And an absence of that quality is not necessarily a bad quality, unless it's like seriously bad to the point where you completely can't differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my personal stance on that, because
no, I would definitely agree.
Like, I dropped Monster, the manga, 70 chapters in, not because I didn't like it, but because my experience with it was very buffery. Like, I was reading it in kind of like pieces, and it was over the span of like 2 months. And when I wanted to continue after taking like a 2-week break at chapter 70, I noticed that I didn't know the names of characters and couldn't differentiate them because I'd taken such a long break from it. The scans were kind of bad, they were pretty bad, and Urasawa has same face syndrome in that sense, and what we're talking about just now, his characters look pretty similar. So I just thought, I'm gonna drop this, watch the anime, because I love like the Madhouse 90s anime vibe, and that's what Monster is. And apparently he's got brilliant voice acting, and the voice actors will obviously help differentiate. So I just thought, all right, let's drop it and watch the anime someday. And since it's on Netflix now, that might be happening soon. But yeah, we still haven't moved on to your agenda. Hit me with Eden Zero. Yeah. What's it about?
Hold on, let me ask you this, because I'll pitch it to you, but I'm going to tailor my pitch. So let me ask you this. What was your experience with Fairy Tail generally, and what would you say your biggest gripes with it were?
Okay, good question. Very good question. Okay, this is gonna be hard because my experience with Fairy Tail was watching it weekly, season 1 weekly as a kid, as like a very young teen. And I think I was pretty much a kid. I was like 10, 11. Yeah, it was around then. It was like around the time Marineford was airing, right? It was like, yeah, it was around then, like 2010, 2011. So Fairy Tail for me absolutely peaked in the Tower of Heaven. Yep. With Natsu versus Jalal. And I still to this day have very fond memories of that. I have very fond memories of the Fairy Tail battle of like the guild with Laxus and Gagiel. I have some fond memories of Edolas, but I thought, like, I was a kid, so I didn't really look at things very critically. But speaking with my brother about it, because he was much older at the time, he's 7 years older than me, speaking with my brother about it, like in retrospect, like over the years we've spoken about Fairy Tail quite a few times. The one thing about Edolas I've always had a gripe with was Mistogan kind of feeling like, you know, all the mystery around him kind of went to shit. Like, it didn't really deliver, for me at least. But yeah, it was, for me, Fairy Tail was a fun time. Like, I was young, I didn't really look at things critically, I don't really have gripes with it. I'll just say it didn't keep me invested for too long, because once season 1 ended, I stopped watching the series. I remember going back to reading every arc in the manga after that, in the span of like a couple weeks, after that, like, I think this would be like around 2015, 2016. This was when I was in like my manga binge mode, where I'd done that with a bunch of series. Like, I'd done that with Hitman Reborn. I'd done that with a lot of series, and like, since that's now 7-8 years ago, I can't really tell you exactly what I felt, because at that time it was just pure entertainment, just getting into the experience, going through it, not trying to remember anything, just reading for the sake of reading. So yeah, it would be hard to say, but I've always loved Mashima's art. I've always thought he has fantastic art, and I've always liked his adventure fantasy vibes, because he has some really cool fantasy concepts. I just love that kind of vibe. Like, it's like pre-time skip One Piece vibes, you know?
Yeah, that is actually a great segue. So before I pitch this to you, let me make sure I heard this correctly. So generally speaking, what you enjoyed about Fairy Tail while you were still watching it was the adventure / fantasy vibes, the characters, more or less, the art style.
Yeah.
And then
the fights.
The fights. Okay, so the fights. And then your only real criticism of it is sometimes the plot was a little sloppy or didn't really feel like completely thought out.
Yeah. I'd say it was a bit sloppy, yeah.
Okay. So you have basically already pitched it to yourself, because that is everything I'm going to say to you right now. Okay. So, is it like a fantasy like Fairy Tail is? No, it is a science fantasy, not a science fiction, a science fantasy. So, when this came out and when I started to get into the series, people like to accuse it of being Fairy Tail in space, but realistically, and people have said this before me, it's almost One Piece in space. Like, if you wanted that Luffy goes to the moon arc, that is pretty much
Eden Zero.
Okay. It is like they will go to different planets. It's very much got that vibe of early One Piece, or like we saw recently, like when they all of a sudden went to Egghead Island, of like, okay, we're going, we don't know where we're going. Okay, we show up on this island, or we show up on this planet. Oh my god, it's like this completely bizarre planet. It's just like the very fantasy-esque planet. So there's a theme park, a fantasy theme park planet that they start out on. There's a water planet. There's a few water planets. There's a planet that's like a city, but it's stuck back in time. There's a planet that is like home to like all of these crime guilds. There's all kinds of crazy planets. So they'll go from like planet to planet. There's a like a VR gaming planet that's like completely digital. So it's got that, right? It's got the adventure vibe that you like about early Fairy Tail, early One Piece. Okay. So the art style, it is literally Mashima at his peak in terms of art, because not necessarily right at the beginning, but early on in Eden Zero, he made the switch to digital art.
Okay. And now he's perfected it.
It gives, say that again?
And like now, like over time, he perfects it.
Yeah, like he very much perfects it. Like it gains a slightly different aesthetic from Fairy Tail. It's still very much Mashima, but you're like, okay, this is clearly different. Like if you compare the end of Fairy Tail to like Eden Zero now, very much different, and you can tell why. One is like analog and one is digital. And especially if you look at his art on Twitter, where he like colors stuff, or you look at the covers of the manga, it gives it just this like glossy look of like, I want to click that page. I want to buy those volumes. It just looks so good.
Yeah, I've seen some volume covers of Eden Zero, and I think that glossy look is actually a good way of putting it, because it does have that glossy look.
It's very polished, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, as far as the characters, so the characters are really good. You have Shiki, who starts out like Natsu. He has a goal, like he wants to make 100 friends. But as the story goes on, he is definitely unique from Natsu. He is much more of a leader in the traditional sense. He becomes like the Luffy of the series.
Okay.
And he will actually like draw the line sometimes. Like there's one arc where a villain kind of like trolls him. He's like, "Oh, I'll be your friend," and he's like, "I would never be like a friend with someone like you. You are everything I stand against." And you're like, "Okay, this is definitely not Fairy Tail," or not to bash on Fairy Tail, but like, "Okay, this is a lot. This is awesome."
Yeah.
And on that note, something that you didn't bring up, this series gets dark, like not berserk dark, but there's themes of like racism, like you saw in Fishman Island, discrimination, power struggles, all like humanity versus androids, and like what makes a person, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's interesting.
The villains are so good. Like there's one main villain, his name is Draken Joe. He's like a crime lord. Like he is almost like the crocodile of Eden Zero, and he's like a gangster's gangster. Like he's all about money, but he doesn't kill people. He's like, why would I waste a perfectly good worker? And he'll go put you in the mines. He knows how to scheme. He's always like 3 moves ahead of you, and he's just a boss. Like there's a big spoiler, I'm not gonna say it, but like he does not mess around. Like he's just a boss. Then you have another villain who his name is Shura, and he's basically like the perfect he's one of the most perfect foil villains I have seen in any anime or manga in the last decade. Like the way he is paralleled to Shiki is as close to perfect as you can get to a parallel in any story. And when you read that arc, everyone said the same thing. I love how much I hate this character because he is that good of a villain. And then the last thing, because I've been going on for a while now.
Nah, keep it going. You're doing a good job of pitching this. I'll say that.
So I polled people today on Twitter and on YouTube because I'm actually doing a video on this, like Fairy Tail versus Eden Zero.
Okay.
I was like, which one do you guys prefer? And what everyone said said they prefer Eden Zero is the plot, and here is why. So when Mashima did Rave Master, he planned the whole thing start to finish. There were some things he changed, but pretty much planned the whole thing. Fairy Tail, he did not plan out. He pretty much planned it arc by arc. So by the time he would get to a new arc, he's like, okay, now I gotta start from scratch. So that is why, while the pacing is good, while the characters get a lot of good moments and fights, there are certainly moments where you're like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
Like when they go to Edelus, like, when they find Igneal and the dragons, and they're like, wait, so they were here the whole time? Seriously?
Yeah, I do remember that now that you sparked the memory. Yeah.
There are certain things where you just go, okay, Mashima, I see you. I'll cut you some slack.
Yeah.
However, that basically almost never happens in Eden Zero because he has basically mixed the approaches. He has planned all the big plot points in Eden Zero, but he mixes things up and he leaves room in the like storyboard phase
for him to
that he can kind of add things last minute.
Yeah.
And it becomes abundantly clear because the pacing in the story is so good. Like you will read this and maybe not right away, but once you're like
into
40 chapters ish into it, like you will want to binge like the next 200 chapters. The pacing is that good. Everything just flows perfectly. Some manga, there'll be a big arc and then the transition between arcs sucks. Eden Zero does not have that problem at all. It just flows so well, and there's so much foreshadowing. It's like not One Piece level, but it's pretty close. Like the way you see things foreshadowed, you're like, oh wow, this was planned a long time ago. So it basically takes all the issues you had with Fairy Tail and makes it better. Like the plot is just very cleaned up and precise, and you're like, okay, wow, this is elite stuff. And also, one last thing, it's just cool sci-fi, science fantasy. Like if you love Star Wars and like you just love watching the movies, like with the big battles and like just ships going, oh my god, there are panels where there's just battleships attacking each other, and you're like, oh my god, I can hear the Star Wars noises right now.
Okay. See, unfortunately,
I'm done.
Hey, you cooked. I'll give you that. That was dope. On that note, on the Star Wars note, man, unfortunately, I've yet to see Star Wars. So that's got to happen. Everyone gets mad when I say that because like, how have you not seen Star Wars in 2023? But yeah, I have yet to see Star Wars. That's got to change, man. That has to change. I'm probably gonna watch it at some point this year because I've wanted to for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, on that note, because you mentioned all three of Mashima's main works, so Rave Master, Fairy Tail, and Eden Zero. We were having a bit of a conversation about this last night, but how many chapters are each of these series?
Rave Master, I believe, is close to 280, so it's like just under 300. Fairy Tail is like 540, 550 something, so it's less than 600. Eden Zero is currently in like the 220s, so it'll probably finish, if I had to guess, like 280, maybe 300 chapters.
Okay, so far, if we're doing 550 plus 280 plus 220, that's like 1,050 chapters roughly.
Yeah, the man. So I said this to you on Twitter last night. The man is literally like a production, like his output is crazy. So at one point he was doing, so he currently does Eden Zero all by himself, and then he does the storyboarding for the Fairy Tail sequel, Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest. So he does Eden Zero and Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest. He has somebody else who does like all the final drawings and dialogue and stuff.
Okay.
And then at one point he was also doing a third manga called Gate of Nightmares, which was based on a game that he was doing all the art for.
Okay. Wow. So he's an output master basically. That work rate is ridiculous.
And he was doing a YouTube channel, which he still uploads to, and he was doing Twitter streams, and he was learning how to make his own video game.
Good lord. I know about the Twitter streams actually because he's always speaking to George Morikawa, who's my personal GOAT, the author of Hajime no Ippo. Yeah, he's always in there with Morikawa. They seem to be good buddies. So that's further incentive for me to check out Eden Zero, to be honest.
That's what I'm saying, man. GOATs love him.
Hey, but yeah, I think this is actually a perfect segue because we're talking about Mashima's work rate, and another mangaka who is massive in terms of work rate is obviously the artist of Dr. Stone, Boichi, and that's something else that you want to pitch to me as well. And I will say with Dr. Stone, I have watched, I think it was the first 3 or 4 episodes. I got to the point where they found berries and they wanted to make wine, so that's the third episode, something like that, maybe even the second episode. I don't remember clearly. But yeah, I love the premise. I love the vibes. I just remember that one scene of him counting at the start in the first episode and thought, yo, this guy's raw. But I just never stuck with it, and I regret that. But seeing how nice the manga art is, I do feel compelled to read it. How many chapters is it? Because I know it's completed.
So when it ended, I believe it was short of 210 chapters. I believe it's like right around 210.
Okay, so that's an afternoon read. It is Boichi, to be fair. So because his reads are generally pretty quick, at least for me, because I remember reading the Ace chapters pretty easily. But I don't know if that would be applicable to a series like Dr. Stone. It might still be though. Is it very dialogue heavy?
It can be, but generally it's not. The spots where people kind of get caught up on are when they talk about the inventions. But if you just like, and I mean this in the most genuine way, if you just shut your brain off when you read those, you'll be fine. Because people will read those and be like, what's calcium fluorinate, blah, 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 blah. And it's good. No, you don't need to know that.
Okay.
Just like kind of remember that they mentioned it, but you don't need to have a PhD to read the series. They're gonna,
okay, yeah.
They don't just like, they don't like Bill Nye everything. Like they do more showing than telling.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You get that a lot. That's like, yeah, you can find examples of that in a bunch of stories where there's things that they kind of need to explain because the plot demands them to, but it's not necessarily information that the audience needs to retain or understand. It's just to add like an organic element to the story, make it feel more natural. But yeah, premise of Dr. Stone, I mean, I kind of know, well, not necessarily, because I don't know what it like builds into, and I don't know if I want to know, to be honest. I feel like Dr. Stone is one of those ones where it's it's kind of just one of those stories that a big charm of it is finding out things for yourself in the same way the characters are, because that's what it's all about, right? The characters are in this situation where, you know, they have to. I feel like they're trying to recreate civilization. The main character is, what's his name again? His name Senku. He's just like he's just got like a 7,952 IQ, and he's trying to basically he's excited about the fact he's in this situation, and you're just along with the way.
Yes, he is excited about it, and he literally says it all the time. He's like, "Oh, I'm excited. Like, let's get excited. Let's get hype." This like boundless potential kind of story. So I do want to get into it and find out for myself. So I don't know if you even need to pitch it to me, but if there is anything you'd like to say, feel free. So I will make a few points. First, I will start by saying, and this is just like a hot take. Well, not a hot take, but a hot take. There was an arc 2 years ago. So not this Manga of the Year stream, but the one before, where Dr. Stone was in the stream. It's and this is kind of a spoiler, but it's whatever. It's the South America arc. I promise you, my friend, if you just read to that arc, you will agree with me when I say that is probably, at the very least, top 5 arcs, at least, if not in manga, at least out of Shonen Jump in the last decade. It is one of the best arcs in manga I have ever read. It is HBO levels of drama, like.
Okay, wow, that's a good pitch, man. Man said HBO levels of drama, yo, that's
insane.
That's my GOAT TV shows right there.
I legitimately thought it was Game of Thrones Dr. Stone edition, Sopranos Dr. Stone.
Hey man, don't mention the Sopranos. You know how to get to me, huh?
I know how to get you. You shouldn't have had me on. I was using all the tricks.
Oh no, I fuck with that. Okay.
So South America. If you do it for nothing else, read it for South America. I know you. I know how excited you get, and I know you love your Twitter threads. If you want to write a juicy Twitter thread and just annoy everyone on your feed, I'm telling you right now, bro, read South America. All right, so that's that.
Okay, go on, keep going.
On another note, don't worry, I still got more. Even if I sold it, I gotta sell a whole package. So you brought up the point of like how excited Senku is and how there's like all this potential. I have said this for a while now. I will say it again. Dr. Stone probably has the best take on shonen optimism. If you read shonen manga like One Piece, Naruto,
yes,
all that stuff, yeah, there's a common theme of like, if you just work towards your goals,
yeah,
you can accomplish anything.
It's like the motto of Shonen Jump. I forgot. There's literally an actual motto. I bring this up in my slam dunk video, but it's all about dreaming. Like it's not even just about the mangaka. It's literally a defining quality of the magazine is being stories that inspire you to dream. So yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big thing, that kind of optimism.
Right. So Dr. Stone does a very practical take on optimism, which is very refreshing because it feels like in a lot of series, it really feels like, okay, if the characters just work towards it, then they'll get it, which is great to read. But when you've read that kind of story a lot, it does kind of get like, oh, okay, whatever, right? But Dr. Stone, because it is such a priority to base things on practical science, it very much takes a practical approach to shonen optimism. So
stylistically fitting.
Huh?
The approach of the theme is like kind of like stylistically and narratively fitting in that sense, yeah.
Yes. So off the top of my head, the best way I can put it is I'm actually going to quote the reboot, which is kind of a prequel, where it follows Senku's father, and one of the characters is like, well, who made you leader? Like, you just all of a sudden making decisions. And he basically says, I can't remember the exact quote, but he basically says, I'm just trying to find the right solution and figure out how to get there, which is so good because, again, it's not like, you know,
it's not blind.
I can do whatever I want. It's I'm finding the best solution and just figuring out how do you get there.
it's very grounded in that sense, and it's like you can apply that to so many things in life, because like a lot of shonen, obviously their stories are so extreme and so exaggerated that a lot of these optimistic characters and their quotes is very, it's just like you can't really apply that, because it's just so, it's kind of like at times it feels like blind optimism, you know what I mean? And that seems like a very mature kind of outlook to have. So that is cool. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, and like the way you see it in practice is basically just the characters using the scientific method of like, okay, I figured everything, like there were literally, and this is going to segue into my other point, there will literally be times where Senku is like, okay, I'm busy with this project, I need you guys to do this, do this. And the characters are like, what are you talking about? This is like science stuff, we can't do that. He goes, I wrote down all the steps, you guys can do it. He literally quotes one time, and again, this is from South America, so again, another reminder to read South America.
Right.
He goes, scientists do not have a patent on science, which is like, it's such a like corny quote, but it's also very inspiring, because like you think like, you know, these super smart people are like, if you apply it to basketball, if you apply it to YouTube, whatever, like you think people are in this realm, but once you have the rules, once you have the steps and the how-tos, you really can figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what you see a lot in Dr. Stone, of figuring out the steps, the rules, and the how-tos, and then it's like, oh, well, now I can do it.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that quite a bit, to be honest. You've sold me, man. You've sold me. You're 2 for 2 right now. You got you.
All right, let me go 3 for 3.
All right, okay.
All right, hold on, wait a minute. This is another Dr. Stone point. So.
Oh, okay.
I will make it quick.
I thought you meant a third manga. I was like, okay.
No. I understood what you meant. I said it.
Okay.
No. To segue from the point I just made, Senku, at least I would argue, is the best, if not best in all anime and manga, is the best shonen protagonist. Better than Thorfinn, better than Ichigo, better than Luffy.
Good
and
Lord.
The reason for that is because he is probably the best leader in fiction I have ever read. And the reason for that is because
of South America.
What'd you say?
I said because of South America, but
because honestly,
yeah.
It's one thing that you said, like he's just excited. Like his passion for everything is very real and it's very apparent, and you like almost get sucked into it. But the big thing is his, like, he is a exceptional leader in the traditional sense. Like Luffy is a leader, but he's not like a leader like, you know, all the great leaders of history.
He's not like pragmatic in a sense.
Senku is very pragmatic, and the way he does that is by delegating. So again, there will be scenes where like characters like, well, I don't know how to do this, and he's like, I wouldn't give this job to you if I didn't think you couldn't do it.
Okay.
And what that does is now the character is like, oh, okay, Senku says whatever, I can be an engineer. Senku says I could be a cook, so I must have it in me. So then now because they know Senku is so smart, and because he has set this expectation for them, now they're not just doing it because he believes in them, but because he's this practical scientific guy. It's this very real thing of like, well, he just said I could be a scientist.
Like his belief in them.
True.
Yeah, his belief in them is enough to believe in it themselves.
Following them because he's a leader, they're like, well, it must be true. Like Senku is very like yes or no, like very direct. So if he says it, it's like, wow, that must be like a fact.
Yeah. I feel that heavy. It's like when you have so much respect and admiration of someone, it's kind of like if they believe in you, that gives you everything you need to believe in yourself, especially because like you know they're not the kind of person to lie or to sugarcoat things. And I don't, Senku doesn't give me that impression at all. I feel like if someone isn't capable of doing something, he'd make that clear.
Right. And so because of that, not only does he elevate the characters and bring out the best in them, but by being such a good leader and inspiring the characters to be the version of themselves that Senku sees, it inspires you as the reader, and now you're reading the story and you're like, wow, Senku is a leader's leader. Like like as you read the story, you're like, this is probably the best protagonist I've ever seen.
That's a, you know, that's a hot take, There's gonna be a handful of people in the comments mad about that one. I can tell you that one for free, but you seem to stand by it.
I've got my popcorn. They can salt my popcorn.
But yeah, I respect it. I always like when someone has these like unconventional, unpopular takes that they stand by, because it's more authentic, right? Like there's so many stories out there. Everything is gonna speak to someone a bit differently, and not even just that. The arguments you've given me is not even about it speaking to you. It's like you genuinely, I feel like you have a good understanding of his character, and I'm saying that with someone with zero context, so we'll see when I do read, but I'll make sure to let you know.
Yes, I'm looking forward, even if you don't love them, I'm looking forward to hear your take and your experience.
Definitely, yeah. I will say, out of the two, I am far more excited for Eden Zero personally, because
That's totally fair.
There's a strong nostalgic attachment to Mashima. Very strong one.
I will say, though, you might feel different when Season 3 comes around, because Season 3 of Dr. Stone is called Treasure Island, and everyone says this is basically the One Piece arc of Dr. Stone.
Yeah, that, you know me, man. A lot of people have this impression that I don't like One Piece, but like One Piece at its peaks. This is a good segue as well to the next part. Yeah, One Piece at its peaks is like, it's like the best ever to me, man. It's something I really, really love. But unfortunately, One Piece discourse is very black and white and extreme in either one side or the other. And the trigger for this divide, at least in the community lately, seems to have been Wano. I feel like it's been the last 4 years. Before that, I mean, there always was this kind of toxic side. I mean, that's kind of common in every mainstream manga, that you get that everywhere. But One Piece is like next level. And obviously you're a pretty big fan of One Piece, so I have a question. What's your personal opinion on Wano?
I would say Wano, at least right now, I would say Wano is a 7 out of 10.
That seems pretty
I would say
fair.
It did a lot of things right, but it also did a handful of things wrong. Like, not like I would have liked to seen this, the Shogun of Wano should have been a badass samurai, Zoro should have got this fight, blah, 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 blah. There are, and I don't mean objectively, but there are objectively things that needed to be in there and just weren't.
Yeah. No, I feel what you mean. My stance on Wano, I don't know if I want to share this just yet, because I am planning to eventually make a big boy video on this matter, but I guess I can talk about it lightly.
How would you rate it, and then generally, what was your impression of it? Or what is your impression of it? Excuse me.
Yeah. So, Wano, I can't give you a number rating because this kind of fluctuates, but I will say very bad. If I had to put words on it, I'd say very bad.
Like less than a 5?
Yeah. Okay. I would say that.
Right.
I would say that personally. And for me, it boils down to 2 big P words in storytelling. 1, presentation, and 2, prioritization. So in these 2 regards, and when I say presentation, I'm not necessarily talking about artistically, because I feel like everyone, even not everyone, but a bulk of the community, even the people that are, big diehard fans, can somewhat agree that One Piece has had, a fair share of its issues artistically. And honestly, yeah, you can't blame Oda. The man's been going for a very long time. It's a very tough, taxing occupation or career to be in, so it's understandable, but it detracts from my experience greatly, so I have to still mention that. But for me, the presentation aspect is more so in the plot and the delivery of the story itself, in terms of the moving parts. So both of these points kind of work together, presentation and prioritization, because they are a product of each other, right? The reason why it's so hard, or the reason why the presentation of things in Wano has been so clunky and so sloppy and so, the best way I can put this is reading the Wano arc in the manga. It feels like I would have the same experience reading a summary of the Wikipedia. Now, that seems harsh, don't get me wrong, and it is exaggerated in some regards, because there's some stuff, obviously, that there are some stretches in Wano I actually really love, but I feel like the way things are presented, it feels very like tell, don't show. It feels very shoehorned in, very crammed, very like here, take this, rather than I'm gonna deliver this naturally, authentically, and actually feel like a story. Wano kind of felt like Oda was ticking boxes on a checklist for me. And the reason for this is because I genuinely just think he made a story just far too big for him to handle. For anyone to handle, for that matter. Because the scale of that narrative, the amount of characters involved, it is hell to try and accomplish something like that and satisfy every single one of those plot threads and make it all tie together, conclude everything nicely in a weekly serialized manga. Like, that's the kind of arc, that kind of scale is more fitting to a book series, in my opinion, to like novels. I've always said this about One Piece, about post time skip One Piece at least, because it's just so grand. It's so grandiose. And I feel like in the manga, especially in Wano, things have just felt very underwhelming left, right, and center. And that's just because of how things have been delivered. I'll give an example. Do you remember the Nami and Usopp versus Page 1 and Ulti?
Yes.
Now, that right there, on paper, if I was to read that on like a Wikipedia or like a summary, I'd be like, yo, peak fiction, bro. Nami got her shit kicked in, verge of death, in immense pain, bleeding from her forehead, crying, being put on the spot, and she's stuck by Luffy. She's stuck by her ideals. She said Luffy will be the Pirate King. And reading that in the chapter, I felt absolutely nothing. Because of the way it was presented, because the fight was off screen. You didn't get to see her reach that position, that mental state. You didn't get to actually feel like you were there for the emotional core of this scene. It's just kind of like you were told. You were just shown, okay, so Nami just got her shit kicked in. You didn't really get to feel that and see that happen. You were told it happened. And then it just happens. Like, it just feels like I said, like Oda was ticking boxes on a checklist. And that's just my personal opinion on this, because there are a lot of aspects of Wano that are really cool, really good. Like, I really enjoyed Roof Piece. I felt like that was peak fan service. I feel like that's some shit that people, years we've been waiting for, man. I've been waiting since I was a kid to see things like that, bro. That was special. Now, Oden's backstory is a mixed bag for me, because I have warmed up on it. I used to hate it a lot more, I'll be honest. I have warmed up on it, but I do think it has some of the peak moments of the story. It has some of like just the coolest moments in the story in a vacuum, but I feel like as a flashback, it doesn't accomplish what it's intended to accomplish.
What would you say the Oden flashback was primarily supposed to do?
I think it was supposed to establish the emotional core of Wano, like the framework of the story, in terms of the dynamics between the Scabbards and Oden. It was supposed to make the audience feel bad for the people of Wano, feel bad for the Kozuki, want Momonosuke to become the shogun, want to see Orochi go down, want to see Kaido go down. I feel like that's what it was supposed to accomplish. Not necessarily, it didn't have to do these things, don't get me wrong, because Oda took a bit of an unconventional route in some certain decisions, which were kind of cool to see if I had believed they were well executed, which I don't. Like, for example, the Oden flashback kind of breaks down your perception of what Oden is, because the Scabbards have like this biased understanding of him where they think he was this terrific leader, where that's actually debatable, because it does seem like you could argue he was a fool of a lord, right? Like, I don't think many people disagree on that even. Like, that's kind of the point of his character. He stuck to his morals and ideals, and his people suffered for that, which, you know, that's a big moral discussion that I don't think kind of went anywhere in the arc. Like, was it further explored through other characters? Did we really see that, you know, concluded thematically? Did that come to fruition in the current day with Luffy and Kaido? It just kind of felt a bit half-assed, in my opinion. In terms of Roger, Whitebeard, that beautiful scene of Roger leaving the crew, the disbanding, there were some moments in that backstory that were beautiful. But unfortunately, those moments, at least for me, had nothing to do with Oden. So that's what I mean by really mixed bag for me. I just didn't feel emotionally attached to the story of Wano. Like, for example, in Dressrosa has a lot of the same issues as Wano, just nowhere near as exacerbated, nowhere near as problematic. Like, in terms of presentation and prioritization, so pacing, all of those things fall under that, right? Pacing, like the delivery, the execution of key moments, that kind of falls under presentation for me, right? That's a pretty big umbrella term, if I'm being honest, but it's kind of the best word I can use to describe all of those things.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I don't really disagree with anything you're saying. In fact, you're kind of saying something that I've been saying for a while. You brought up like emotional connection, emotional investment. So you have a bunch of P's. I'm going to throw another P in there. Now, again, this is just my thesis, my diagnosis. Take this however you will. The P that I think you're missing, and you might agree with, is personal investment. And here's what I mean. When you take all of the best arcs, sagas of One Piece, and then you take all of the arcs that felt kind of off or feel like they just missed that like peak arc threshold. In my opinion, where that threshold cuts off is personal investment. And what I mean by that is look at Arlong Park. What was the personal investment in that arc? It was Nami. They were going to save Nami. Everyone was doing something for Nami. Okay, look at Verity, right? Sanji. Okay.
Zoro.
Right?
Yeah, it kind of had Zoro in his dream. Yeah, it kind of had that. I mean, it was only 50 chapters in the making and 24 episodes in the anime, but that's still a solid amount of, that's quite a long amount of time for you to develop that kind of attachment and personal investment. So it has that.
Exactly. But so you have Arlong Park, you have
Arabasta has the whole saga with Vivi,
I was
everything.
Just about to say Vivi.
Yeah.
The whole point of it was Vivi.
Yeah.
So the whole time you feel like everything is going on for Vivi. Okay, you can even make this argument, and then of course, I mean,
every single arc has this in Priest High Skip. You have Water 7 Robin, you have Thriller Bark is kind of a mixed one because it's not really about that, but
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's on the arcs that, like you said, doesn't reach that peak threshold. The Summit War Saga.
Look at Marineford. What did it really come down to? It was
Ace.
about saving Ace.
Yeah, someone we had a strong attachment to, not necessarily just through him, but through Luffy also. And the way it was handled in terms of, my other P-word presentation was beautiful. Getting pieces of their backstory slowly. Getting moments of Ace talking about Luffy and his bond with him, with Jinbei in the cells. And, it was just wonderfully done. But then you come to Wano, and I personally think that wasn't there, because even though we've spent 300, no wait, going into Wano, yes, we had spent 250 chapters with Kinemon and Momonosuke, and I didn't feel much for them, bro. Don't get me wrong, Zou was fantastic at that, right? Zou, it made me really feel for the Minks. I felt a lot for the Minks going into Wano. I wanted to see them win. I wanted to see them get back on Jack. Well, I don't feel like that really amounted to much, bro. Honestly,
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't have much to say. I just don't think it came to much. Sulong Minx, what happens? They off-screen Jack. We don't even get to see it and feel that revenge that that has been set up for 200 chapters at that point. So it was 180 chapters at that point.
All right, so let me kind of diagnose what I think happened with Wano. Obviously, everyone says the same thing. Oda was trying to do too much at once. Okay, that's part of it, but here's how this could have been solved. Okay, you have Alabasta, right? Obviously, or even let's talk about Marineford. Okay, you had a ton of stuff going on in Marineford, but the reason that arc doesn't feel like Wano and it feels like it has a lot of focus and direction is because at the end of the day, it all narrowed down to Ace and Luffy, right? That's another way I was trying to put it. Not just personal investment, but we're invested in the relationship between Luffy and Ace.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So now you get to Wano, and there were a bunch of different ways Oda could have done it, and he fumbled each one, in my opinion. Okay. So you have the Minks, obviously, as soon as they get to Wano, they're just side characters, basically. You have the samurai, the scabbards, who were very important and were hyped up, and then you get to the raid. The big thing they do is they fight Kaido rooftop.
Which was pretty dope until like I'm not gonna lie, I personally, despite contrary despite like the popular opinion on them, I'm kind of satisfied with what we got from the Scabbards personally. I'm kind of satisfied. Like, he gave them a lot of time with Kaido. We got to see them lose, which was a good decision, obviously. Like, what other way would it have gone? But it was strong. I just feel like it was missing character. It was right, he gave us things on paper, but it was missing something more. But my biggest problem with the Scabbards doesn't even come from Rooftop. It comes from Odin's backstory, where meeting Odin was like montaged. Like, we just got them, just got in montages.
So that's part of it, right? Is like, okay, so it's not like we're not really here for Luffy's relationship with the Scabbards. That's not really the focus. At one point, it was feeling like it was going to be Tama, because what happened? We get to Wano, and she's like the first character we meet. We get her backstory. She's connected to Ace, for crying out loud. So already we're like, oh my God, can we please adopt her? And then we like forget about her for a bunch of chapters. Like, I went on record saying Oda messed up. Like, Tama should have gone to the raid. And then literally the week I said that, the next chapter was the one where she showed up and saved whatever, Usopp or Nami.
Yeah, it was Usopp and Nami from that terrible moment I mentioned earlier. Not terrible, but you know what I mean. I don't like that moment, unfortunately.
Right. But that's the thing, is like, with something like Alabasta, right? It's about Luffy and Vivi. With Marineford, it's about Luffy, or the Straw Hats, however you want to put it, and Robin and Ace. When you get to Wano, it's like, besides the main plot,
there doesn't seem to be an actual core to the arc, like a strong narrative core.
No personal investment. Like, there's no relationship or personal social dynamic that really centers everything.
Yeah, it just feels like it feels like this boiling pot with a bunch of ideas, bunch of characters, but it's not turning into anything. It's just being stirred. Whereas all these other arcs are like, they're like a pot with all these different ingredients, and they're all coming together to make this wonderful meal. Whereas with Wano, it's like a bunch of ingredients, and like, what is he cooking? Like, that's how I feel about.
I agree.
That's how I feel about Wano. But I have so much more to say about that, and it's kind of tough to like discuss these things on a podcast, because we could talk about this for days. I'm not gonna lie.
This could be like a 7-hour podcast.
Yeah, we could go through each act, talk about each character individually, every plot thread, what it amounted to, what it didn't amount to, and we could be here for a very long time. And that's why I've had a full retrospective Wano analysis script sitting down that I haven't even started for the last 4 months.
I know how that goes.
Haven't even started it. I don't have the energy to do all that. I actually have a more positive One Piece massive video essay I want to do soon, so I hopefully will start working on that. But in regards to a full retrospective Wano analysis, one day. But rather than that, I feel like what's more interesting to talk about is the state of One Piece discourse. Wano right now has had this effect on the community where I feel like a lot of people are very overly defensive of any sort of criticism, and on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who are criticizing anything and everything, because, Wano has stained the series for them. Now, I know I called Wano very bad, and I stand by that, but I have been having a great time with Egghead. It feels streamlined. It feels like Oda is only focusing on the things that matters. I mean, look at the cast of Egghead. It is literally Luffy and the Straw Hats, Bonnie, a character who we've wanted to see more from for God knows how long, Vegapunk, and guess what? Cool. Vegapunk is split into 6 different characters, so even though there's 6 extra characters, it's all tied to one character, and it's all it's all supplementing the idea of Vegapunk. It's all characterizing one thing, which is really cool.
Right.
Then what else do you have? CP0 and Sentomaru, and now Kizaru's coming. Like, other than that, there's no extra fluff. That's it. There's no wasting time. It feels like every panel in the chapter is effective. It doesn't feel like anything's being wasted. Whereas in Wano, I felt like it was 150 chapters long, and if you cut away half of that arc, I wouldn't have lost much, personally. So I'm very happy with the more streamlined approach Oda's taking with Egghead, and I do feel like that's because he's trying to wrap things up in the next, 5-6 years, because obviously the final saga is going to be long. People who think it's going to end in 2-3 years, you're bugging, because Oda's not doing that. But
God, no.
Yeah, but it is still going to be, in terms of pace, quicker, because in terms of plot and in terms of how much shit's going to happen, it's going to way more than, Wano's going to happen, and Wano was 4 years. So it's going to be like 5 to 6 years, but a lot better paced, hopefully, if he keeps up this trend of what he's been doing for the last 20 chapters. So yeah.
Yeah, as far as the state of One Piece discourse, it's almost like a vicious circle where like one thing starts and then another thing starts and then that other thing makes the first thing worse. So like my observations, and again, you talked about how the Brago Discord and that community was toxic, but in reality, like as an outsider, like it's also brought up like a lot of big names like you, JD, Sin, like a lot of people have come out of that, and it inspired constructive discourse. Like, as probably like crackheaded as it was, like it inspired people to like think about what you're reading, right?
Yeah.
So again, I talk about One Piece, but I am not nearly as involved. So realistically, this is an outsider looking in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think a lot of it comes down to where One Piece is story-wise, and also like the state of One Piece content on YouTube. Because whether you like it or not, the reality is that what people produce on YouTube or what big names talk about guides and directs what everyone else talks about. Right?
Yeah.
So whether it's Mr. Morge, whether it's, Grand Line Review, whether it's O'Hara, when they make a video, people like to use that.
Yeah.
They either will use that and say, oh, I like that idea or I like that character, go watch that Mr. Morge video. Or they'll be like, oh, you're exactly like whatever Mr. Morge, you say blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So One Piece, when One Piece YouTube was still young, you could kind of talk about whatever. Like the big thing that stood out to me was like the character analysis videos, right? Like if you look at O'Hara's channel, that was his big thing, was character analysis videos.
Yeah, I remember he done a Straw Hat series.
A lot of people. Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And as you see One Piece YouTube evolve to where it is now the big thing is not even chapter reviews, but theory videos, right?
Yeah.
Who can come up with the biggest theory? Who can come up with whatever theory first? Blah, 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 blah. Who can make the most entertaining theory video?
Yeah, and that was actually O'Hara, to be honest. He set the new trend. He turned the curtain on the great age of One Piece theories, because that best One Piece theory you'll ever watch, it did something. It made waves in the community, and people just are trying to get that multi-million view video that blows like that. And I also feel like it's not just O'Hara either, though. I also feel like
it's definitely not. Like if you look at Mr. Morge's channel, he used to be, so on another note, right, it's not just it went from character analysis to theories, but on a sort of more abstract level,
it became more sensationalized and hype based than actual
but also there used to be a lot more retrospection, and now there's almost none of it.
Yeah,
Wano ended, people talked about it for like a week, and now nobody is like talking about Wano.
Yeah.
Nobody is like really analyzing characters from Wano.
Yeah.
They're done with it.
Yeah.
It's the state of One Piece discourse, whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, whatever, is very much prospective. And so I think that's partly because of the meta of One Piece YouTube and how you stand out. And also Twitter threads, right? Like the big threads right now are like the theory threads.
Yeah.
But also it's because of where One Piece, the story is, of like the end. We're in it. We're in the end.
Yeah.
So people are very focused on like what's going to happen next. How are things going to end? As opposed to like, let's review what just happened.
Yeah, you actually made a really good point of that about the community being very prospective, because it's very multifaceted. There's so much going into this. I do think it's one because people are sick of Wano, even people who loved Wano. Don't get me wrong, there's people who love Wano, but they're just sick of talking about it because it was 4 years long and that's all people were talking about for 4 years. Then you have the fact that, yes, we're in the final saga. Everything that's going on right now is very exciting. We're seeing things we've waited decades to see. Then you have the fact that I think, and this is not just for One Piece, and I don't think it's a creator thing or like a YouTuber thing, but actual just a YouTube and just the nature of the internet today sort of thing, with very short attention spans. Everyone is trying to keep people engaged and keep people's attention, and in order to do so, unfortunately, you have to really, like, you have to talk about things that are intriguing in that sense, like things that you have to bring things to the table that no one else is really talking about. And that's why we've kind of moved on from the age of character analysis and stuff, because no one's talking about it now, but it was like the kind of thing, it was like the meta for so long on YouTube. Remember, like, everyone was doing video essays and more, raw analysis of like just diving deeper into character and themes and different story elements. And that meta's kind of done for now. And I to be honest, me personally, I don't really care. I'm sticking to that. I do have, like, you've got a great point, because my my second most popular video in the last few months, got like 80k views, is you need to watch this Pariston theory from Hunter x Hunter. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
I've got a huge Hunter x Hunter theory, another one in the works that is hopefully going to do that well as well, because that is the meta right now. Big theories that are really intriguing and that really grasp people's attention.
Now, I do want to add one thing. I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I am saying. One Piece theories have been popular since as early as people got together to talk about One Piece. I mean, I've heard people say, I was theorizing about Marineford. Like, that's early.
Yeah,
so, like,
do you remember the days where One Piece content used to just be like a song playing in the background with a bunch of text on the screen telling you the theory? Yeah. People used to write out their theories for YouTube videos. There was no voiceover back then. I mean, that was the meta. You put some OST in the back, you type up your theory, and that's it. You got yourself 500k views. I remember there was this channel called something Sanji, and it was...
Yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about.
I think his name was Vinsmoke Sanji. I think this is when Whole Cake Island first started in the manga in like 2016, 2015, 2016. And yeah, it was a funny time. That's what the One Piece community used to be like, but it's changed. I don't think it's just One Piece. It's just the YouTube community in general, the anime manga community. It has changed drastically over the years. People used to be able to just sit in front of a camera and just talk for 10 minutes, and people would enjoy the video. Now you do that, no one is watching your videos, because the production value has become so important and it's become so much more competitive. So yeah, things have changed drastically.
Yeah, and the thing with One Piece too, right? So I was doing primarily One Piece content for a while, and I got to a point where I kind of plateaued, and I had the realization of I either need to do this all the time, I need to do chapter reviews, theory videos, and only discussion videos on like the most recent trendy stuff. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah,
By the time I do a review video, first of all, I hate review videos. I hate chapter review videos. Same. I've got like 30 privated. Like I don't do that. The only time I do it is when a crazy chapter drops. Like Hunter x Hunter dropped a crazy one recently. Right, exactly. So I thought, I have to talk about this. Mm. But like, you can still do those like broader discussion videos. The problem is like, and even again, like, I'm not just talking about YouTube. We can bring this to like Reddit posts, Twitter threads. The problem is like, people have done the same post, we can say, over and over again. Why Zoro is such a great right hand. Why Zoro and Sanji are the perfect wings. Why Nami is a great female character. Why Usopp is like the brave, useless character. People have done the same post over and over again. So it's great that, like, you know, you go on Twitter and like, oh my God, I just read One Piece and this was my experience. That's great. But to a certain extent, nobody cares because they've seen it again and again and again, right? So, like, yeah, it sucks that you can't just say whatever and like everyone gives you a billion views. Well, you can and you can't, but it's also good because now it means
it forces you out of the box.
Have to come up with some shit.
Yeah, you have to think out the box. You can't
just say what everyone else is saying.
Yeah.
You actually have to be like, actually, here's what I think Wano did really well.
Yeah.
Or, actually, here's why the you know, the retcon in Egghead Island wasn't that bad. Like, you actually have to have unique, interesting, valuable takes.
Yeah. That is a good point. You have to really think out the box now. And I think that's why I've been enjoying making content a lot recently, because I'm constantly thinking about new ideas, things no one else is doing. I'm studying what other people are doing and seeing what they're not doing in order to find out what I should be doing. So it's been a very interesting process in that sense, and it forces you to be more creative, which is really cool. But yeah, I think we're nearing on an hour and a half, which is a lot longer than I thought we would be going for. But this has been a great chat. I didn't even notice the time going like that.
This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. We need to do this again sometimes. Maybe when I read your recommendations, we'll do like an updated one, huh? That sounds like a plan.
To have you on a stream for my channel. If you read Dr. Stone and you like it, we might need to do a stream around season 3 of the anime. No. I definitely can get you hyped for that.
When is the anime dropping?
So season 3 starts in March.
Oh, okay, that's a short deadline because I need to reread Attack on Titan. But perhaps we'll see if I can squeeze it in. We'll see. I'll let you know.
I'll put it this way: so if you just want to catch up, like if you want to read the manga and then pick up the anime, I actually think the anime is better. A hot take. You would have to read about 80 chapters of the manga, which is basically one afternoon, and then you would be caught up to the anime.
That's more than doable. I think I can do that. Yeah. I think we can make that happen, man. All right. I'm gonna end it there. If you guys made it all the way up until here, thank you very much for watching, and make sure you check the description. Go and check out OG's videos, drop a little subscribe there, and just watch his stuff because they're really cool. He's got some really cool videos there. He's got some really interesting positions, and I actually want to talk to him more about some of these things. So yeah, like for the Bleach stuff, for example, I'm excited to see what his thoughts are on that, especially the manga. But yeah, before we go for another half an hour, let me just end it. So yeah, peace guys, thank you for listening.